In preparation for this sermon this evening, I took the time to read the stories of women who had experienced the many trials and tribulations related to infertility. You see, I was reading their stories and they were both very painful and hard for me to read. And although I'm not a mother yet, because I have to say it, because my mother is sitting in the audience and she wants grandbabies, and I promise, Mother, I'm going to give them to you. You see, I could only imagine the pain that comes with desiring to wanting to have a gift as precious as a child and yet being unable to. Or as a woman having to experiencing the physical pains of miscarriage after miscarriage. You see, as women, we often place a very high confidence in our bodies. Because in particular, during pregnancy, we are the carriers of the child. I was surprised to just find out how common of an issue this was for women here in the United States. See, in doing my research, I found that according to the CDC, 6.7% of married women between the ages of 15 to 44 are infertile. 6.7%. And additionally, 12% of women ages between 15 to 44 also have used fertility services. One of the most notable women that I had come across was Gabrielle Union. And she, in her story, she's been very open and transparent regarding her pain of having to conceive a child. Early in her career and in the early parts of her marriages, she painfully retells in different interviews that she suffered between 8 or 9 miscarriages. And she was quoted as saying that nobody wants the world, which is what it feels like, the world, to think you're defective, or less than a perfect woman, or less than capable. There's just so much shame and mystery, that guilt that surrounds fertility. Gabrielle Union, in many ways, is where I would situate Hannah in the text this evening. See, she was a woman that was filled with shame, a woman who had been ridiculed, and a woman so deeply in her pain from the barrenness that she carried. And Hannah, just like Gabrielle Union, had felt that she was less than a perfect woman. And some of us also know that feeling of what it's like to be less than in a particular area of our life. Hannah had felt that her body was in some ways defective. And she carried this guilt that she was unable to provide her husband Elkanah a child. And in the Old Testament tradition, you see, a childless woman was considered a failure. Her barrenness was a social embarrassment to the family. And for Elkanah, you see, he was a Levite, a member of the Kohathites family, and you see, that was the noblest of the Levite house. And so on top of that, her embarrassment for Hannah would have been seen in a very public way. Everybody would have known that she was defective.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you see, the children, they were the very fabric of the economic structure and the source of labor for the family. It was their job to care for the parents in their old age. And so not was only Hannah worried about being sad and being ridiculed, but she was also uncertain about who was going to care for her in her old age. And you see, as someone who comes from a community that has strong, deep-rooted cultural values, I can understand the pressures that Hannah had felt herself under. And not to mention, on top of all of that, y'all, she had the jealousy and anger of Penai breathing down her neck. You see, I like to call her hashtag petty penny.
Yeah.
Don't be, church family, don't be a petty penny. And you can see in verses 6 through 7 that Penai, in her jealousy and mean-spiritedness, ridiculed Hannah for being barren. And it brought Hannah to the point that she could not eat. And what was so interesting is that Penai, see, she had children of her own, both sons and daughters. And yet, because Elkanah had shown Hannah favor over Penai, the scripture said that is what made her jealous. So, what lesson can we glean, church family, from this part of the text? Don't have more than one wife. It's just messy. Or more than one girlfriend. That's just even messier. Now, despite the messiness Elkanah was that he was committed to worship. And despite the family dynamic, you see, he remained committed to his desire for worship as a family unit. Now, the part where this kind of gets tricky, y'all, is that these moments of family worship for Hannah were painful. Because the space that should have been designed as an intimate space for her to be in relationship with God without judgment and the eyes of others turned out to be the place that had triggered her pain. She was church hurt. And yet Hannah did not allow that to stop her. You see, she still kept coming back to the altar. She still kept coming back to the altar. But that's not where I want us to focus this evening in our text. You see, the most critical part in the foundation of my message, you see, the one that many of us have probably overlooked, is in verse 8 when Elkanah says to Hannah, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? I just need to take a quick moment and pause and reflect, y'all, on the insensitivity, y'all, of Elkanah. You see, for one, his words were failing to acknowledge the socio-cultural expectations that were being placed upon Hannah. And not to mention, he was also dismissive and not acknowledging the validity of her pain. The pain that was attached to the burning desire for her to be a mother. And yet he believed, y'all, that his love would be sufficient, that it would suffice. And lastly, y'all, because there's more, you see, it's not stated here in the text, but there's a high probability that Elkanah had married Hannah first, and when she could not conceive, sought out another wife, Penai, further solidifying Hannah's feelings of inadequacy. But Elkanah, he wanted to talk about, I'm not enough. Clearly, sir, I wasn't enough for you. Now, anyone who's ever been married and experienced fertility issues can share the level of strain that it places on their relationship. You see, Myra Mendez, a licensed psychotherapist, states that sadness and helplessness may play out in the form of arguments, irritability, dissatisfaction, or resentment. And see, Gabrielle Union, she's quoted as saying that this issue of infertility almost broke her marriage to NBA star Dwayne Wade. She said there were heartbreaks that nearly broke us, streams of tears that turned into raging rivers. You see, I can only imagine, y'all, that Hannah might have felt the same way, and yet she carried it alone. She carried it alone. Okay, I'm gonna hop off this soapbox, but I really just want us to remember and be reminded that we should not be dismissive of the real pains that are being expressed of our loved ones in our lives. We should not be dismissive, y'all. So, not only was Elkanah insensitive and emotionally absent for Hannah, but he does something that I believe was far more detrimental, something that I know that we've all done. You see, Elkanah believed that his love could be a surrogate for the child that Hannah so desperately desired. And we too, you see, we've often possessed the belief that when we're painfully holding on to a desire or a dream that has yet to come to fruition, or it looks like as if there's no hint for its due date, you see, we choose to accept or believe that something else can somehow replace it. That something else could be a substitute. But Hannah knew that there could be no substitute for this God-given desire to have a child. There was no substitute for it. In Psalm 37:4 it reads, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and I will give you the desires of your heart." You see, when God places a desire in your heart, when God places a desire, it's often birthed from your heart. With every heartbeat that flows through your pulmonary veins and your pulmonary arteries, so comes this desire. You see, there's no replacement, there's no substitution. You will come to know its identity as God-given because it will nudge at your spirit and continue to nudge, even if it may seem that God has not honored it. You see, theologian that Hannah was barren.
Yeah.
However, I like to state the claim that although she may have been physically barren, she was spiritually fertile. And I know some of you all know what it's like to dwell or to be in barren spaces. And yet the spiritually enriched soil that God over the years has toiled has kept you fertile enough to believe in God's blessings. And so for Hannah, she pressed on. And in her desperation, she kept coming back to the altar, y'all. Because that spiritually fertile ground is what kept her the strength to believe that God would honor this God-given desire. You see, you, like Hannah, must press on. You must not settle for a substitution. You must not settle for the next best thing. Because the weight of the possibility that lies ahead, you see, the weight of the impact that comes from this desire is far too significant and far too serious. Too much is on the line. Too much is on the line for you to succumb to fear and complacency. Creation would be without what it is that you have to offer. Creation would be what it is without that you have to offer. And for Hannah, it was the birth of Samuel. You see, the people of Israel, they had found themselves a marginalized community under the oppressive rule of the Philistines. They were weakened politically with very little institutionalized power. And they were awaiting a hero, a king, David to be exact. But for those of you that read your Bible, you know that the story didn't just begin with the entrance of David to save the people of Israel. No. The lineage begins with the birth narrative of Samuel. You see, how could Hannah have known that if she didn't press on the transformative power of Yahweh, that the saving of the people of Israel would have been birthed from her barrenness? How could she have known?
Yeah.
And what's clear here is that this God-given desire for her was attached to the humanity of other people. To other people. I know we've just come off the heels of Black History Month, but we celebrate Black History over here 365, y'all. Kind of forever. And I can't help but consider the names of civil rights activists and entrepreneurs, Black men and women who, despite the barriers to the birthing of their dreams and their desires, you see, did not stop them from pressing on for themselves, but more importantly, for our community. And you see, if I were to take it and make it even a little bit more personal, Mom, like my grandmother and my great-grandmother and my grandfather who pressed on so that I could be standing here today. And even so, y'all, Hannah's legacy is not limited to the saving of Israel. No. You see, her legacy, which we remember her by also, was that she was committed to this nudge, to that desire, to that painful desperation, to that anguish and that grief. Her ability to lean into that desperation is what pushed her to a place of prayer, to a place of submission. You see, my friends, that was what enacted the power of God to move in her life. Samuel, for Hannah, was a child of prayer. Tear-filled prayers. Her gift to the people of Israel was that she dared to trust a God that would hear her cries. See, we ought to possess the gift of Hannah, the gift of audacity, the gift of courage, and most importantly, the gift of transparency. This was her legacy, y'all. This was her legacy. We must possess this ability, y'all, to pray from a place of deep desperation, even when it may seem that it is physically barren. We can identify in the text Hannah's moment of desperation. You see, it says that she was silently praying as Eli watched in bewilderment. And Eli wasn't privy to her silent words. As a matter of fact, she thought she was drunk. And what's interesting, if you read ahead, you'll know that all the debauchery that his sons Hophni and Phinehas were up to. And so it wasn't a far-fetched notion. They was living their best life, little Duval style. And Hannah, you see, she pushed back. In verse 16, she says that, no, that I was praying out of my grief and my anguish. Sometimes, y'all, We've got to be willing to pray from a place of grief and anguish, from a place of desperate worship. This often will require that you and I give God a level of transparency. See, I've had many nights where my prayers weren't all praiseworthy and feel-good statements. No, some of my prayers consisted of tears and anger. Some of them with questions like, why me, God? Can you hear me? You put this dream inside of me, and yet I don't see it coming to fruition. Why, God? Why me? And as I stated earlier, you see, it was that desperation, that transparency that activated God's power in my life and also in Hannah's. And so, for yours. And I believe this desperation is what signified to Eli her committed belief to that beckoning call in her life. That I will wait and I will trust in you, O God.
Yes.
And so Eli, he responds to Hannah something to the effect of, go on, girl, God got you. I'm paraphrasing, y'all. But you see, that was enough for her to believe, enough for her to trust that God had heard her prayer. But what I truly love about this moment, y'all, what I truly love is that Eli didn't even know what she asked, and he didn't even care. You see, it wasn't his business to know the details, and sometimes it not need to be the business of your friends and your loved ones to know all the details of your altar laying, prostrate forward, tears flowing, anguish, silent prayers. Sometimes all you need is someone to put their arms around you and say amen. Sometimes all you need is someone to reach out their arms and speak life over you. Sometimes all you need is someone to utter a prayer that induces that life-giving dream. You see, you need that husband in that delivering room who's yet annoyingly, yet lovingly encouraging you to push. Push from the depth of your heart. Push from the depth of your soul. Push from the depth of your pain. You see, if someone hasn't told you yet today, I need you to push. I need you to push, church family. I need you to push. And so, just like Hannah's story, Gabrielle Union story also led her to the birth of her daughter this past year by way of a surrogate. Her daughter's name is Kavaya James. You see, some of you may not actually end up being the carrier of your dream, but you will be the one to pray for it to rise. You will be the one to nurture it. You will be the one to see it walk, the one to see it grow up. I see that some of y'all miss that, huh? Some of y'all may not be the carrier of that dream, but you will be the one to pray for its arrival, the one to nurture it, the one to see it walk, the one to see it grow. You will be the one to make it flourish. That will be you.
Preach, ma'am.
But 4 months before the arrival of her daughter, Gabrielle Union had posted this photo on Instagram. And on the photo, there was this caption, and on the caption, I'm going to paraphrase, but she shares that this was the day that her and Dwayne Wade had made the commitment to embrace faith, to hold on to one another in joy and peace. You see, they made a commitment to take hold of the audacity of courage, to hope for which had not yet arrived. And for Gabrielle Union, see, this was a moment outside of the Lord's house, and she was uttering her silent prayer. Church family, I just need to know, are you ready today? Are you ready to begin uttering your silent prayer? In this season of your life, in this time in your life, I need to know, are you ready to begin to this audacious courage that will birth something powerful, something great? Are you ready to not settle for a substitute? Are you ready to not settle for the next best thing? But reach out, church. I need you to reach out, church. I need you to push. I need you to push for the best thing that God desires for you. The best thing that God desires for you. I'm getting ready to close. I'm getting ready to close. But I want to leave you with this last story.
Yeah.
See, I had the honor of teaching our youth several weeks ago at FCBC. Shout out to the young dreamers. And we were discussing on how to be imaginative. And so I asked the question to the young people in the room if they had ever had an imaginary friend. And of course, all the kids in the room raised their hands and shouted out their different names. And this young boy, I believe he had to be no older than 4 years old. You see, he raised up his hand and he said, God. And I said, well, that makes sense that God would be his imaginary friend because, you see, to a child, imaginary friend is someone that we don't see. And well, we can't physically see God, but yet we trust that he hears us.
Yeah.
And so I followed up with the question if their imaginary friend had left them. And naturally, some of the answers in the room were yes. And some had moved to very nice tropical places like California and the DR. And so I was wondering, I said, okay, well, some of them had left because of age, so some, because they had gotten older, they had drifted away. And so that same child who had said God was his imaginary friend, Richard, that same child who had said God was his imaginary friend, you see, he shot up from his seat, y'all, and he said,